exist in this dojo, does it? No, Sensei! Defeat does not exist in this dojo, does it? No, Sensei! What do we study here? The way is this, sir! And what is that way? Strike first, strike hard, no mercy, sir! I can't hear you! Strike first, strike hard, no mercy, sir!
During his stint in the Army, Kreese won the U.S. Army Karate Championship title and held it for 2 consecutive years in 1970 through 1972. After retiring from active duty in 1975, he returned to his old stomping grounds in the San Fernando Valley, reintegrating into society after experiencing the untold and unseen horrors of war is undoubtedly a near insurmountable task. And for those of us who haven't touched a boot down in an active combat zone, we have no idea what demons lay behind the windows into a veteran's soul. For Kreese, he endured many hardships and suffered greatly during the Vietnam War, and a battle-worn, stronger, hardened man remained psychologically locked inside a war zone. Adding with the love of his life, Betsy, being lost, Kreese was permanently altered and scarred. Inside a tattoo shop at some point in 1975, we see Kreese and Silver getting the infamous Cobra Kai tattoos featured in the Karate Kid franchise and Cobra Kai television show. Silver informs Kreese he will be unable to assist in the day-to-day operations because his father is demanding he put karate and the things he experienced in the war behind him, further giving Silver an ultimatum instructing him to move on with life and take over his father's business, or he'll be cut off financially. While Kreese is upset hearing this, protesting with Silver, stating he cannot do this without him, Silver reassures him, adding he will financially support Cobra Kai, so he will still have his assistance, just not in the same way they both originally planned. So, over the next decade, after the two parted ways, Terry went on to become extremely successful in his father's business, while Kreese trained students in the way of the fist. They traveled to South Korea to train under Kim Song-young. Notice a young Kim Da-yoon quietly hiding, watching them train, almost exposing her location when a large jar is disturbed. Kreese, showing his compassionate nature seen earlier in his life, knocks over a pot, taking the blame, distracting Kim Song-young, allowing Kim Da-yoon to remain hidden and unpunished. Later, we see Silver approach Kreese about the ScytedTV, a world karate tournament not well known in the United States. After explaining his plan to spread Cobra Kai karate across the globe, Kreese disagrees, saying that they're not ready, instead informing Silver of his plan to continue to train the students. He explains how his new student, Johnny, is the #1 prospect at becoming his best student. Silver, while disappointed, agrees to follow his friend's decision, offering his help, reminding him he will always be there for him due to his life being saved during the war. Kreese had continued mentoring Johnny since his arrival at the dojo when he was 12 years old. We lead to a flashback where Johnny had received his blue belt, but was crying due to difficulties at home, and the constant bullying and belittlement from his abusive stepfather. Kreese, having no shred of sympathy, starts carving into young Johnny's mind by telling him that the moment he cried, he was a loser, and that he didn't train losers. After forcing Johnny to loudly recite he was a winner repeatedly, the seeds were being planted, changing an innocent, timid boy looking for a father figure into an aggressive young man who was strong, but didn't understand the difference between being strong and being an asshole. Okay, we have some major takeaways we can gather here. We have established Kreese's early years. We know his history about his family, the loss of his love Betsy, what happened to him during his tours in the military, and how the origins of Kreese's Cobra Kai's philosophy were first integrated, later cementing into his mind. We have the relationship of Johnny Lawrence, the brotherhood bond between Silver and Kreese, and the genesis of Cobra Kai itself. Let's remember these details as we move into 1984. The year where everything changed for Cobra Kai, and more importantly, where everything changed for John Kreese. It's 2017, and we see an older, more cynical and alcoholic Johnny Lawrence reopen the Cobra Kai dojo. Upon doing so, he unknowingly reignites a 30-year-old feud with Daniel LaRusso, who is now a successful car salesman in the Valley. Daniel is not understanding why Johnny would ever want to reopen Cobra Kai, due to the negative and damaging influences Kreese had on them and former students of his. Johnny doubles down and tells Daniel that he plans on teaching his students differently than Kreese, and the lessons he taught are constructive if properly taught. Sometime later, Johnny learns about Cobra Kai's permanent banning from the tournament due to the prior actions of Kreese we explained earlier in the video.
No, you don't ban me, I'll ban you!
Johnny attends a meeting with the All Valley Council, of which Daniel is a member of the board. The board ends up reinstating Cobra Kai as a competitor for the All Valley, and Johnny leads his team to victory in the 2018 All Valley tournament. It's late at the Cobra Kai dojo, and Johnny is closing up the place for the night. From the shadows, he hears a familiar voice congratulating him, revealing himself to be none other than John Kreese, alive and back in the valley. He says they finally have an opportunity for revenge against Daniel for getting Cobra Kai closed down 3 decades ago. Johnny, shocked to see Kreese standing before him alive, angered by the damage he had done to him in the past, Johnny attacks, kicking a cigar out of his mouth, continuing to pursue the assault. However, it's Kreese who takes the upper hand in the fight, kicking Johnny into a glass wall. Johnny angrily tells Kreese about him breaking his second-place trophy and how he tried to kill him after the tournament. Kreese responds that he never tried to kill Johnny, enraging him again, attacking Kreese once more, resulting in Johnny having Kreese in a chokehold, reminiscent of the Karate Kid 2, where the roles were reversed. Johnny, seeing his reflection in the broken glass, shows his former sensei mercy and releases him. Kreese, commenting on Johnny showing mercy and honor for an older man, trips him and lands a final blow as the cigar kicked from his mouth earlier at the start of the fight has grown in proportion, leading the sprinkler system to go off. After the fight, Johnny is called by Kreese, who gives him instruction to meet him at a diner. This is where Kreese subtly assesses Johnny for any weaknesses while informing him of what he's been doing in the time we all last saw him. According to Kreese, he enlisted as a Marine and military instructor in the United States Army, later participating in Operation Desert Storm and going on to train Navy SEALs in Afghanistan. He continued to say that after retiring from the military, that when he returned to the Valley, he had become disgruntled with the new generation, viewing them as self-entitled, weak, feeble show-offs and ass-kissers. This is where Kreese makes his first attempt at convincing Johnny in his rejoining of Cobra Kai, which Johnny outright refuses. Later, we see Kreese return to the dojo, carrying a bag. After a brief conversation with Johnny, Kreese shows a fixed second-place All-Valley 1984 karate trophy. He looks at Johnny, saying he fixed it for him, smiles, and slowly leaves. With Kreese leaving and walking a few steps away from the dojo, we see Johnny rushing out after him, telling him to wait up. It's right there. Do you see it? That smile our old friend Kreese gives before turning around is a smile of ice. It's not a smile someone gives when overjoyed by the prospect of second chances and starting anew. It's the smile of a predator laying in wait to spring on its unsuspecting prey. Kreese has rejoined Cobra Kai, found a way inside Johnny's head, and filled it with the same promises he did over 30 years ago. The same script, just with different dialogue. He couldn't convince Johnny in his first approach in the diner, so he attacked Johnny's mind, emotionally and psychologically manipulating him using the fixed second-place trophy, making him believe Kreese had changed. As the series progresses, we learn more about Kreese, starting with Johnny Lawrence's student Miguel calling on some of Kreese's stories in the question. This leads Johnny telling Kreese discovering he's been living at homeless shelters for the last 10 years and working a variety of odd jobs. He continues on by revealing he attempted to re-enlist, but the military wouldn't take him due to a failed psychiatric evaluation, also suggesting a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. Johnny, realizing his former sensei is in a very rocky situation in his life, and allows him to return to the dojo. And with that, the snake has risen, and it's only a matter of time before Johnny Lawrence sees just how vital an error he made in allowing Kreese back into Cobra Kai. For you see, where the brumation ends, and the rise of John Kreese's Cobra Kai returns. Now a sensei at Johnny's dojo, Kreese begins involving himself in the activities and insidiously weaves his more aggressive and brutal style into the student instruction. Under Kreese's encouragement, we see a vengeful Hawk and other Cobra Kai members destroying the Miyagi-Do karate school, Hawk taking Mr. Miyagi's Medal of Honor. During a lesson, Kreese and Johnny are explaining the concept of giving it your all, and sometimes you just have to make a decision and push through, even if you get hurt. A sentiment that reflects well in the complicated areas of life. We see this in the form of a last team standing, hunting and tracking style game at Coyote Creek. Each team has a headband. One is red, the other is black. Kreese informs the class that this is meant to be thought of as a life and death-like exercise on a battlefield. Now Johnny adds that this is just an exercise, adding to temper Kreese's philosophy with his own. This is where Hawk, formerly Eli, under Johnny Lawrence's instruction, now following Kreese's abusive methods influencing him. We also see Miguel and Tori cruelly toying with an opponent before taking his headband, with Hawk and Miguel later squaring off. Miguel delivering serious punishment to Hawk after discovering he was the one who destroyed the Miyagi-Do school. Following the tenets of no mercy, Miguel defeats Hawk.
Hey, what the fuck are you doing awake? Go to bed!
Johnny unfortunately leaves to see his longtime friend and Cobra Kai teammate, as seen in the Karate Kid and Cobra Kai series. Kreese strikes a deal with the landlord and owner of the strip mall, which includes Cobra Kai, gaining ownership of the dojo, after claiming he will fix all the financial, among other issues Johnny left while tending to his dying friend. He also continues training Johnny's students in the old ways of Cobra Kai, the brutally unforgiving style as taught from Kim Song-young. Johnny, upon returning from burying his dead friend after giving him a last night out before his unfortunate passing, he finds out what Kreese has been teaching his students and kicks Kreese out the dojo, giving a speech about the differences between no mercy and no honor. A concept which was warped by Kreese on the new generation of Cobra Kai. With the tensions between Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do karate at an all-time peak, it all culminates in a chaotic brawl at West Valley High. The major focal point is Robbie versus Miguel, as we see Miguel following Johnny's version of Cobra Kai and showing mercy after defeating Robbie.
I wasn't taught the difference between mercy and honor, and I paid the price for it. If I'm extra hard on you, it's only because you have the potential to be better than I ever was. You want that, don't you?
Unfortunately, Robbie, succumbing to his anger, kicks Miguel off the second floor, his back smashing off a metal handrail, putting a stop to the brawl. Robbie immediately realizes he went too far, and in a panic, runs away. It was after the high school fight which left Miguel temporarily paralyzed by Robbie. Now on the run as a fugitive, we see the effects of Kreese's influence over the Cobra Kai students. There is now division within the ranks of Cobra Kai, many losing faith in Johnny while Kreese assumes his position as sensei and new owner of Cobra Kai itself, resurrecting the original unforgiving school it had once been, using Johnny's remaining disillusioned students to fill its ranks. Kreese only loses a couple of students in the aftermath of the high school melee, including Tori Nichols, who's been placed on probation for instigating the fight, and Aisha, whose parents pulled her from the dojo and moved away. Kreese convinces Tori to return to the dojo by offering free tuition and putting a halt on the advances of her unscrupulous landlord. We see Hawk take extreme displeasure in Kreese's recruitment of former bullies Kyler and Brooks. While Kreese is testing the new recruits, Hawk volunteers to fight Brooks. But what we see next isn't even close to a fight. This is where Hawk releases all the rage and pent-up aggression any bullied youth would hold.
Please, stop.
We see Hawk brutally punch Brooks until his hands are covered in blood. Hawk standing and spitting on him before walking up to Kyler, staring right into his eyes. Kyler, seeing his friend suffering after a horrendous beating, simply looks away. This moment is important because this is the defining difference between Johnny's Cobra Kai and Kreese's. While Johnny shows mercy and honor, Kreese doesn't. To Kreese, you win at any cost. During another lesson, we see Kreese in something covered by a cloth. He reveals it to be a small mouse, which the class softens. Now Kreese asking who wants to name the mouse, and a student Bert names the mouse Clarence. After removing the cloth revealing a snake in a cage, he asks Bert to feed Clarence to the snake. While attempting to place Clarence in the snake cage, he quickly stops, stating he can't do it. Kreese turns to the rest of the class, asking who else takes issue with feeding the mouse to the snake. A few students raise their hand, and Kreese kicks those students out the dojo, further teaching cruelty and ruthlessness are the keys to victory, not only in karate but also in life. After Dimitri's arm is broken by Hawk during a fight between Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do in a local laser tag establishment, Samantha's mother and Daniel's wife, Amanda, angrily enters the Cobra Kai dojo, slapping Kreese without provocation. Later, when Amanda and Daniel are inside the police station, with Amanda attempting to place a restraining order on Kreese, we discover he already filed a restraining order on her for slapping him in the dojo. With one plan failing, Amanda and Daniel convince Armand. Remember him? He's the owner of the strip mall that Cobra Kai operates out of. They convince Armand to evict Kreese, claiming he's unstable and unpredictable. Armand is unconcerned by this and says Kreese pays his rent on time, which is all he cares about. Amanda offers triple the current rent for evicting Kreese until they can get a new tenant, which Armand agrees to. But Kreese has a different idea. When Armand and his nephews confront Kreese attempting to evict him, Kreese swiftly beats up Armand and his two nephews. With Daniel and Amanda at LaRusso Auto under the belief that they got rid of Kreese, Daniel receives a call from Armand, initially overjoyed with Amanda, thinking their plan was successful. The mood suddenly shifts when Armand explains he cannot get out of the deal. Grabbing the phone from his hand, Kreese states that you cannot end a war with diplomacy. He continues suggesting Daniel prepare his students for battle because he has greenlit Daniel, his family, and everyone associated with Miyagi-Do. Now, it's open season on all of them. With incredible timing for revenge, Kreese has planted cobras inside a car on the showroom floor at LaRusso Auto. Amanda and Daniel were horrified, not just because all their plans had failed, not just because of the snakes. It's the fact that Kreese let the LaRussos feel and experience a terrifying realization. It's the realization that, at any moment, at any time, Kreese can have them anytime he wants them. Remember the anatomically incorrect karate dojo Eagle Fang Johnny founded after losing Cobra Kai to Kreese in his forced exit? During the first meeting of the new Eagle Fang, Johnny was addressing his students. Then he sees Hawk approaching, joined by a few other of his former students. Originally happy, he quickly realizes it's not a nice reunion after all, as he sees Tori, Kyler, and Kreese and the rest of the Cobra Kai appear in suit. Kreese offers Johnny a final chance to reunite with him and continue bringing Cobra Kai to new heights as they originally planned. Johnny disgusted, rejecting Kreese's offer, blaming him for the negative changes in his former students. Kreese disagrees, saying he cares about his students, complimenting their collective strength and ability as fighters, then adding how his students wouldn't make the mistake of showing mercy in a fight and ending up in a coma, referring to Miguel after the high school brawl. Miguel, angered by this, steps up to Kreese, only to be faced by none other than Hawk. With Kreese calmly holding Hawk back, he tells Johnny he lost his chance. This is important to take note because of what you see on Kreese's face. What you hear in his voice lies the presence of true venom. With his former best student now against him, Kreese leaves with his students preparing for the All Valley. Throughout the preparation for the All Valley tournament, we see Kreese telling his students to win at all costs. And with their would-be allies now enemies, he instructs the class, with enemies attacking them on all sides, there is no turning back. However, one thing that could put the entire tournament in jeopardy would be a town hall meeting to determine if the All Valley should be allowed to continue due to the recent violent events occurring between the teens involving karate. When called to approach, Kreese takes immediate control of the room, introducing himself as a retired Army Captain John Kreese, displaying himself as a pleasant and well-intentioned member of the community, continuing to serve it by teaching children strength and discipline through karate. Kreese points out his students should not be penalized because the student who committed the act was from Miyagi-Do, painting Daniel and his school in a poor light publicly. When Daniel attempts to protest, Kreese quickly catches favor with the councilwoman and continues on by saying his goal is to prepare youths for the unfortunate realities of the real world. He ends by saying he's preparing his students to defend themselves. Daniel interrupts, claiming Kreese is selling the council a lie, bringing up the fight where Hawk broke Dimitri's arm. Now, Kreese accurately retorts that it was a fight started by Daniel LaRusso's daughter, Samantha, adding on another layer, making the LaRussos and Miyagi-Do look very guilty of perpetuating the violence in the valley. Amanda jumps out of her seat and angrily yells at Kreese, calling him a piece of shit after hearing the remarks about her daughter. When the councilwoman quiets Amanda down, Kreese explains he had to file a restraining order against her, and the way he puts it is pure genius. A restraining order for physically assaulting him. It is accurate as far as statements go, legally speaking. However, I must point out the dangerous ability in poetically making Amanda look 100 times worse, especially after her outburst directed at him. Johnny interrupts the proceedings, expressing that everything Kreese is saying is a lie, and he isn't good for karate or the valley. Now, Councilwoman Roberts is noticeably frustrated after hearing Johnny and Daniel start and continuing to interject, talking over each other. She explains how all three of them are a good example of why the tournament shouldn't take place. Now, while it's true, Miguel, and yeah, Sam was there too, were the ones who convinced Roberts to allow the All Valley tournament's continuation. He convinced her by saying karate gave him confidence and the ability to defend himself from being bullied and beaten up. While Roberts doesn't get it, she allows the All Valley to proceed, if they all sign waivers stating the city isn't liable for anything that happens. The All Valley is back on. We see Kreese inside the Cobra Kai dojo after hours looking at the 51st annual All Valley Karate Championship poster. Robbie enters and addresses Kreese. Just like before with Johnny, like father, like son. We see the same smile we saw when Johnny called him out from the parking lot after returning the 1984 second place trophy. Kreese's reach is proving impossibly monstrous. His ability to plant the seeds of deception and sprout this infection of loyalty to him is something cult leaders would envy. It's revealed Robbie needed a place to spend the night as we see him tending to his personal belongings in the back of the dojo. He walks out to find Kreese already awake training on a century bob. Robbie thanks him for letting him stay. Soon after, Hawk and another couple of students enter, seeing Robbie, and Hawk immediately takes issue with Robbie's presence. Kreese explains that he is a guest and to be treated as such. Later in a conversation with Kreese, Hawk is questioning why Robbie is allowed in the dojo after what he did to Miguel. Kreese says they need all the strength they can get with the upcoming All Valley, and calmly explains how in the military, he had difficulty telling who the enemy actually was. How he didn't know if the man next to him would offer him a handshake or a knife to the neck. He says the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and it's a lesson that Hawk intently listens to. Inside the LaRusso house, Eagle Fang and Miyagi-Do join together in a tense but amicable partnership, united against their common enemy, Cobra Kai. However, this alliance is quickly tested when Cobra Kai breaks into the LaRusso home, led by Tori under the subtle manipulation of Kreese, igniting a giant brawl spanning the entire lower floor of the house. We see Hawk with his loyalties in question for a while at this point in the show. He defects from Cobra Kai to Eagle Fang / Miyagi-Do's side after seeing his best friend Dimitri in distress. After the Cobra Kai students are defeated, Johnny arrives at Carmen and Miguel's apartment and sees Miguel beaten up, icing his shoulder. He storms over to Cobra Kai, already enraged, and sees Robbie training with Kreese. He asks Robbie what he's doing there with his former sensei and father figure. Kreese interjects that Robbie is exactly where he needs to be. It's true what he says. In that room currently stands 3 generations of Cobra Kai. Kreese's intentions aren't to simply win the All Valley, no. He wants to, and I quote, melt this whole snowflake generation. If the man wasn't such a cold and calculated sociopath who'd happily manipulate me into stapling Cobra Kai propaganda to my chest and running through public just because he could, I'd almost say I like the way he structures his sentences. It's always a great delight when he speaks his poisonous vocabulary. He offers a final chance for Johnny to join him and Robbie back into the fold of Cobra Kai's banner, with Robbie beckoning his father to join them. A quietly intense Johnny attacks Kreese. His old sensei was effectively beaten in a surprisingly quick fashion. Johnny at one point grabs a sai, which Robbie intervenes, attacking his father. Johnny, refusing to fight his own son, using a more defensive style, accidentally counters Robbie into a locker, knocking him out. Daniel arrives just when Kreese has the upper hand, choking Johnny, infuriating and vengeful after discovering the brawl at his home and harming his family. Kreese ends up driving Daniel and himself through the dojo window, with Kreese picking up a piece of broken glass, just like he did with the broken piece of platform in Vietnam above the snake pit. Daniel, using Miyagi-Do pressure points learned by Chosen, which we will talk about in a different video, with Kreese physically beaten, but nowhere near defeated. He suggests that they settle things the old-fashioned way. Yes, that's right. At the All Valley tournament, it's a loser leaves town bet. Later, Kreese is looking at a photograph of himself, Ponytail, and Terry Silver. He picks up the phone and places a call. The person on the other end of the line is none other than his best friend and co-founder of Cobra Kai, Terry Silver. Once again, even when it looks like there's no way out, Kreese, like a snake, slithers away into his burrow in brumation, waiting to strike again. We open on Terry Silver playing the piano, receiving a phone call from Kreese, which he quickly hangs up. Later, we see Robbie entering the Cobra Kai dojo and walking to the back room. When Kreese informs Robbie he's late, Robbie quickly explains he's not joining Cobra Kai and will not be used in the deal between Daniel, Johnny, and Kreese. He explains to Robbie he doesn't think of Robbie as a pawn, he thinks of him as a king. He goes on to say while his father had all the talent and squandered it with the decades of drugs and alcohol abuse, later leaving Cobra Kai and, as he puts it, choosing Diaz. He tells the troubled young man that he has more talent than his father and that all he needs to do is to show it to the world. And how this is not merely about a trophy. It's about being a champion and the reputation of a champion that follows you forever. Kreese is seen visiting his old friend Terry Silver at his luxurious estate, who now goes by Terrence, and is transformed from the person that we saw earlier. Quickly realizing his former friend is not who he used to be after finding therapy in a stable relationship, even describing his actions in the past against Daniel as insane. Kreese reminds him of their time in the military in Vietnam, attempting to sway his former war companion to no avail. Kreese returns to the Cobra Kai dojo and continues pursuing his plan on winning the 2019 All Valley, during which that time convincing Robbie to vent his anger and malice under the guise of a healthy outlet. In a scene where Robbie is addressing the other students in Cobra Kai, we see it spliced with moments of Terry Silver picking at his food, looking 1,000 miles away from where he currently sits. While Robbie's message is about defeating Miyagi-Do and knowing your enemy and who you are. For Terry Silver, we see him contemplating his life, who he was, and what set of choices and circumstances made him into the man walking down into the wine cellar getting a bottle for his girlfriend. We see him pause, then spin kicks the bottle, smashing it against a painting leaning against the wall. It was in that little moment we just witnessed where Terrence Silver and Terry Silver began to merge into what we will be discussing shortly after he is largely involved in Season 4 of Cobra Kai. When Kreese learns about Tori's struggles of working consistently, attempting to care for her younger brother with her mother on dialysis, and after losing her last job over an incident with Amanda LaRusso, Kreese approaches her in the grocery store, catching her off guard. He expresses his admiration for Amanda, being a good mother in her attempts at protecting her own daughter, Samantha, and reveals Tori's difficult home situation to her, then threatens her to be careful of the consequences of her actions. During a training session at the Cobra Kai dojo, Kreese's attention is drawn to a small boy named Kenny Payne. Kenny tells Kreese he's searching for Robbie Keene at his brother's request. The brother Kenny is referring to is Robbie's former rival in juvenile detention, Sean. Kreese, while looking at Kenny, says he's interrupting class proceedings, but Robbie explains who Kenny's brother is, Sean Payne, speaking of his notable toughness and his rivalry when he was in juvenile hall. Kreese, interested in seeing Kenny's ability, has the young man spar with Kyler, but ends up withdrawing from fear. After class, Terry Silver visits Kreese at Cobra Kai. It's like he always knows those malevolent seeds he plants inside the minds of his victims will always bear fruit just when he needs them to. Terry begins talking about how he's living a happy life. However, because of Kreese, his past Vietnam experiences returned. He continues on stating his confusion, how this isn't his fight anymore, and there are other martial arts schools or instructors that he can address these concerns to. Kreese again asks Silver to return in order to finish what they started with Cobra Kai in the beginning. The reason he called Terry instead of the other instructors is because nobody else would care as much as he did about Cobra Kai's future. He tells Silver he misses this. He misses what Cobra Kai and karate meant to him. A claim he steadfastly denies, refusing to rejoin Kreese in his fight for the Valley. Kenny, after training under Robbie, returns to the Cobra Kai dojo for redemption and another chance against Kyler. Kyler's aggression scares Kenny off the mat. However, after Kyler verbally mocks him, causing the rest of the class to laugh at him, Kenny, in his anger and frustration, using his advantage in speed, rushes in and punches Kyler in the face when his focus was faltering. After Kyler protests, stating he wasn't ready, Kreese agrees and says the point doesn't count. However, as Kenny goes to leave, he tells Kenny to take his spot, rightfully earning his place in the Cobra Kai ranks. Kreese describes the alliance between Daniel and Johnny as one doomed to fail, and while they are combining their styles in order to defeat Cobra Kai at the All Valley, Kreese introduces the students to Terry Silver, telling the students how he was the other co-founder of Cobra Kai. The two senseis reunited. Kreese and Silver inform the class that the upcoming training will be more strenuous than they've previously encountered. With the founders of Cobra Kai reunited in their goal of spreading Cobra Kai across the valley and defeating the combined forces of Daniel and Johnny, the deck has never been more stacked. After another incident at the drive-in movie theater, Kreese and Silver are seen discussing their plans on what to do about Eagle Fang and Miyagi-Do. Kreese wants an immediate retaliation and believes his students will always have a target on their backs. Silver, distressed to hear his best friend speak this way, informs him he didn't return to Cobra Kai to involve himself in Kreese's old karate rivalries from 30 years prior. Silver's interests lie in helping kids through karate. Silver isn't interested in old rivalries, at least not for the moment, or having history repeating itself again after making the same mistakes. Silver seems to have convinced Kreese as he and Silver arrive at Miyagi-Do, visiting Daniel LaRusso and Johnny Lawrence interrupting their class. It's noteworthy, pointing out the effect on Daniel seeing Kreese and Silver have on him in the form of flashbacks and symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. Silver apologizes to Daniel for his previous actions and says they were inexcusable, stating he'd take it all back if he could. Daniel, still angered in his mere presence of Silver, tells him to get off his property. And now we get to the real reason for Silver and Kreese's arrival at the Miyagi-Do dojo. While everyone is in agreement there will be a moratorium on fighting until the tournament, provided Johnny and Daniel's students do as well. Kreese adds that they, being Daniel and Johnny, remember the stakes of their deal. The results of this tournament determine who stays and who leaves the valley where karate is concerned. While Silver and Kreese leave, Kreese turns to Johnny and attempts to plant a seed of doubt in his mind about him playing second fiddle to Daniel. On the way back to the car, Kreese asks an angered and extremely mad Silver what they're gonna do now. Silver states it's time to get to work, and they're going to wipe the mat with Daniel. This entire encounter was about It was about reminding Daniel and Johnny that their demons still walk free on this earth, who can and have taken them at their weakest. This is a game. A sick game started by Kreese, now fueled by the reborn Silver. The pair returning to Cobra Kai and informing their students about the moratorium on fighting and their plans for the tournament. Ah, yes. We arrived at the dinner where we began noticing Kreese and Silver subtly begin to distrust each other. Kreese, while happy Silver has rejoined Cobra Kai, wants to make sure they have the same goals and agenda. He's confused by the lessons Silver has been teaching the students, his lessons drifting from Cobra Kai's original way of never retreating, always advancing and pressing the attack. And whether it to be a tournament or not, they always strike first. Silver retorts with Kreese keeping Robbie's true identity a secret from him and essentially stealing Johnny's son, and continues to include his students and himself in his old rivalries and drama. Silver continues by saying the only thing he wants after lying to himself for years, losing himself by attempting to live that lie, then nothing more at a second chance for redemption, so he can raise Cobra Kai to the heights he planned on. He wants to forget about the past and move on, focusing on their students. We come to another training session, which by this point we know is just as much a physical endeavor for the students as the philosophical lecture is on their mental state. Kreese and Silver's lesson for the students is an important one. It's a lesson about weakness. Kreese explains that their enemy's weakness is something to be exploited. Before the students start sparring, Kreese and Silver make a bet splitting the students into teams. The victor will earn a 6-pack of beer. They order Robbie and Kenny to spar. It's in this match where Robbie early on gets the better of Kenny. Upon both returning to their corners, Kenny doesn't think Robbie has a weakness. Silver suggests he's going about this all the wrong way, and that everyone has a weakness. And it's smart advice as we see Kenny discovering that Robbie's care for him is indeed his weakness. Using this to his advantage, we see Kenny winning the match, resulting in Silver's victory and winning the bet, and his six-pack of beer. What I didn't point out earlier, I will point out now, and it's important to highlight this scene because with Kreese being upset with Silver in this lesson about weakness, it alludes that Kreese himself has a weakness. We see him question Silver for this remark. Silver explains it was a lesson for the class, but Kreese continues asking Silver what his weakness is. Silver not speaking, instead listening to Kreese with old memories of the past coming back as he speaks about the cage and how he'd still be there if it weren't for him. Kreese ends by saying he always looked out for Terry, and always will. He needs to fall back in line and follow him instead of going out for himself, relating his choices to a war friend who took point after bucking rank and ended up walking into a minefield. He takes a beer from Silver's six-pack and walks away, leaving him in a stressed and again struggling with his wrecked frame of mind from Kreese's constant manipulation of his emotions, guilt, and sense of repaying someone and something as large as a life debt. While the serpent had heads, the minds are not meeting, and instead, we have seen a glorious beginning now leading to descent and loyalties being tested. Silver is in the back room of Cobra Kai when summoned by Kreese for an upcoming class. Silver expresses appreciation for Kreese and adds he'll do anything to prove his loyalty. The lesson Kreese had planned was his version on balance. We're not talking about staying balanced on your feet. We're talking about how to get inside the head of your opponent, how to unbalance them mentally, and seize the advantage you've just created for yourself. Basically, psychological warfare in the midst of hand-to-hand combat by skilled practitioners. We see the return of Stingray, who we haven't seen in quite some time, taking up refuge at his sister's after the high school brawl we covered earlier. Kreese outright insults Stingray in front of the entire class, stating he will never be Cobra Kai, ordering him to leave the dojo, which he unfortunately does. Silver, after taking Kreese to the original Cobra Kai location, revealing he's contacted his real estate agent, looking for other locations for more Cobra Kai dojos, and after they win the All Valley, the expansion can begin. Kreese expresses what can almost be considered joy at the surprise of the whole matter. Silver leans in, telling him this isn't his only surprise. The surprise Silver was hinting at was Johnny Lawrence coming into the dojo, looking for them both, being kicked in the face when he wasn't looking. Kreese questions Silver if he's responsible for Johnny's arrival. Silver believes delivering Johnny to Kreese is exactly what he wants, so he can exact his revenge. But Kreese is puzzled, asking about what happened to focusing on the tournament, the deal made between four men, and not wasting energy fighting each other before then. Silver, claiming he's listening to Kreese's lesson about balance, says beating Johnny will throw off Miguel psychologically, thus giving Cobra Kai an advantage at the tournament. After seeing Johnny fight back but being again beaten down by Silver, orders him to stop. He should have been wiser than to question him. Silver walked out in frustration and confusion, and we see Kreese look down at Johnny regrettably for his actions of Silver, leaving shortly after. With Silver becoming more unhinged and unstable by the moment, and Kreese attempting to pull Silver back to his side, it appears the drama and rivalries between Kreese, Daniel, and Johnny have influenced him more than he's realized. My friends, everything we have discussed thus far has led to this moment. We have arrived at the 2019 All Valley. It's a three-way dance between Miyagi-Do, Eagle Fang, and Cobra Kai. Stakes have never been higher for the senseis and the students of all the schools at every side, and they will all forever be changed at the conclusion of this event. Kreese orders his students to fall in and begins telling them if they win this tournament, it means more than a simple trophy. It means they will receive glory. It's a moment that lasts forever and cannot be taken away from them because they've earned it. Kreese continues on saying he's had even the most gifted students squander their moment, subtly referencing Johnny. He continues that students should not waste their energy, allowing their emotions to cloud their judgment. Silver adds this wasn't a simple, inspirational speech, spoken from a motivational coach. This was an order from their leader, an order the students of Cobra Kai followed throughout the proceedings of the tournament. Due to the changes in the rule set from the previous All Valleys, including additional categories on which the dojos can compete in, and a separate female and male sections leading to 2 champions, the Grand Champion is awarded to the dojo with the most total points. Ah, there. Now that we understand the new rules of the All Valley tournament, let's see how they're doing, shall we? During the skills and breaking competition portions, we see Cobra Kai students inspired and determined under Kreese's and Silver's instruction, completely dominate, and making no errors in their performances and demonstration. During the combat portion of the All Valley, Eagle Fang, Miyagi-Do, and Cobra Kai all defeat the other competition from the other school, leaving the 3 in the quarterfinals. One important mention is we see Daniel and Samantha finally noticing Cobra Kai had come prepared, training every student to be versed in Miyagi-Do's aggressive defense counter-attacking style. In the quarterfinal match, we see Robbie vs. Kenny. While Kenny does indeed score the first point, Kreese calls for a timeout and asks Robbie if he's fighting his friend or an opponent. He says he thought Robbie wanted to be champion, subtly influencing him. Robbie nods, listening to Kreese's advice, walking back to the mat determined and icy in demeanor, no longer seeing his friend, but seeing the enemy. It's no mercy, and Robbie is a template for it, in this moment soundly defeating Kenny. Now, I have to point this out. Robbie didn't simply beat Kenny. If we pay close attention to this scene, we see Kreese's lessons being taught and put into action. With Robbie the victor and Johnny tending to Miguel's back injury from his quarterfinal fight with Hawk, Kreese stops him and asks him how he is. Johnny dismissing the remark, asking him what he wants. Kreese sighs and explains he had no knowledge of Silver's plans that night in the dojo. He goes on to say that things didn't have to be this way, and Johnny could have and should be at Cobra Kai with his real son, taking a moment to point out Johnny's father-son relationship with Miguel, at times, appears more meaningful than his own relationship with his actual son, Robbie. Johnny, stopping abruptly, turns to Kreese, commenting how Kreese doesn't care about Robbie or him, noting it was under Kreese's instruction Johnny fought dirty, and how he made Johnny sacrifice his soul for the betterment of Cobra Kai. Kreese immediately calls this foul, exclaiming he wanted Johnny to be number 1 and to be the best. He explains how Johnny in the 1984 All Valley against Daniel LaRusso was down 2-0 and close to losing, knowing the loss would lead Johnny straight into the arms of a downward spiral. As Johnny listens to Kreese explaining, no matter what anybody says, it does matter if you win or lose, and if Kreese can help Robbie win, Robbie will forever have that moment for the rest of his life, and maybe go on to continue the Cobra Kai name. Johnny expresses that he will stop Kreese, and Cobra Kai will die at the end of the tournament. With the semifinals over and the finals now taking place, Cobra Kai is in the lead and only needs 1 win in order to secure the title of All Valley Grand Champion. It's Robbie versus Hawk in the first finals match. In the early goings of the bout, Robbie takes the first point. Hawk, quickly calling a timeout, returns to his corner. During the timeout, Hawk explains how Robbie was in Miyagi-Do longer and knows all his techniques. Daniel instructs Hawk that he's been in Cobra Kai longer than Robbie. He knows his style, and he needs to put Robbie on defense. After a furious pace is established, we see another timeout called. Silver digs into Robbie, reprimanding his student on how he's treating his enemy with respect. Robbie angrily asks Silver if he wants to fight Hawk for him. Silver turns back and steps toward Robbie, being stopped by Kreese. Noticing how angry Robbie is, tells him that it's good, and that anger for Silver he should use in the fight. After a closely contested flurry of melee engagements, it's Hawk scoring the final point for Miyagi-Do. Hawk is the 2019 All-Valley Male Grand Champion. Despite this setback for Kreese, his dojo only needed to win one match in order to claim the title Grand Champion. The final match is set between Samantha LaRusso and Tori Nichols. During the finals for the girls division, one moment to take notice of is when Samantha backs up Tori and scores a point. The referee suspiciously calls Tori out of bounds after the strike landed, causing protests from Daniel and Johnny, both coaching Samantha in the final. With the score tied 2-2, and a timeout is called after an accidental strike to the eye, Silver instructs Tori to fight dirty. But Tori has no interest in cheating, believing she can win the match fairly. Pay attention to Kreese in this scene with Tori and Silver upon hearing Tori's response. Kreese's body language says it all. It's in his eyes, and what he has to say to Tori after proves it. He now understands that this is what Johnny has been talking about. And Kreese, having what appears to be a change of heart, stops Silver and informs Tori to do what she wants in her fight. The final point is taken by Tori, meaning she is the 2019 All-Valley Female Champion, and Cobra Kai is the Grand Champion, meaning exactly. Cobra Kai has won the tournament. They've won the bet. The doors of Miyagi-Do and Eagle Fang will close. Cobra Kai has risen victorious. Yet the victory is tainted like many things we've uncovered in Cobra Kai throughout this video. We see Tori celebrating outside the venue with her teammates. While entering back inside to retrieve a bag she left in the locker room, overhears Silver and a referee talking. It's revealed Silver bribed the referee, and if this had not taken place, Samantha would have won the contest. This makes Samantha the actual champion, leaving Tori understandably upset at this reveal. Things aren't over yet. We see Silver and Kreese opening a bottle of 1998 Bollinger. Okay, can I just point out Silver is opening a bottle of champagne valued at around $1,400, celebrating an ill-gotten victory in a high school karate tournament over a loser closes dojo bet with his best friend's old karate rivals because Silver is honoring the life debt of said best friend and dissenting in the madness himself after Kreese's reappearance into his life. Okay, I'm glad I got that out. With the champagne poured, the two snakes celebrate. Silver expresses surprise at Kreese for how he handled Tori, backing off instead of his more militant style of instruction. Kreese brushes it off as a moment of sympathy, which Silver states that's a first, going on to rehash a conversation held earlier. A conversation about weakness, how this entire ordeal wasn't about Silver and Kreese reuniting, bringing Cobra Kai back to its former glory. This was all about Johnny Lawrence. Silver confesses Kreese is his weakness. Now Kreese counters by claiming he's Silver's strength, and again, does what? He brings up Vietnam. Silver rightfully calls this a guilt trip, asking him how many times must he repay a debt before they're good. As they speak, a police siren is heard. Kreese turning to Silver, asking him what he did. Silver only returns coldness, his words ice, saying that he's shredding his weakness. We discover Stingray after waking up from his beating Silver put on him. Lied to the police, alleging it was Kreese who assaulted him. Kreese is also unaware Silver had bribed the referee at the All-Valley. Silver has taken his dojo, stolen his students, gotten him arrested on life-charging, fraudulent charges, and placed him in jail. Now, Kreese may be in jail and no longer walking freely among us, although that only enhances the understanding I need everyone to have when discussing someone like John Kreese. His manipulative range is almost universal. His methods are known and documented, yet everyone still falls for them. His ability of carving his way inside a human's mind, discovering its weakness, and then utilizing them for his own gains is terrifyingly real. Kreese has the drive of a demon. He isn't finished yet, and neither are we. Kreese, after being found guilty of aggravated battery with serious bodily injury, is sentenced to 2 years in prison. During this time, he's targeted by another inmate who takes his jello, mockingly calling him sensei. Kreese is calm and allows this to happen, already plotting his revenge against the man. Kreese enacts a scheme to gain early release from prison involving the psychiatrist. In the early conversations between the pair, it seems as if the psychiatrist believes his words of reform and how he's using this time to figure his life out, going so far as to say he makes friends easily, putting on a grand display of a man who's been reformed, rehabilitated, and ready to re-enter society. This isn't the only plan he's created. We see Tori visiting Kreese under the guise of being his granddaughter. Kreese enlists the help of Tori, possibly the most corrupted student in Cobra Kai aside from Robbie, to be his spy inside his former dojo. With Tori being considered Silver's best student, it makes no surprise why Kreese would use Tori in this way. Through Kreese's instruction, she delivers a message to Daniel via a newspaper clipping from Kreese's court case, the word liar, written across Stingray in red, and conveniently, his new address written underneath it. With Daniel discovering Stingray's new home is bought and paid for by Silver, who apparently has bribed Stingray with modern luxuries and lavish creature comforts for his allegiance to him. We return to Kreese and his plan to escape prison early. However, his plan to manipulate the psychiatrist apparently fails, as she explains that she knows the difference between someone who's truly sorry and has reformed to someone filling her ears with words she wanted to hear. This is why she doesn't recommend that the parole board consider him a candidate for early release. In another counseling session after the failed ruse to gain parole, we see a completely different side of Kreese. The psychiatrist frustrated with him sitting in silence, expressing he's sitting there like a sulking child. He counters by asking what she expects him to do, and he has a point. However, she says he's a sensei and he needs to start acting like it. Professionally speaking, she realizes she's frustrated and has to regain her composure. And she believes and expresses this to Kreese that deep down, inside, somewhere, he's still a good man. And she doesn't believe that he's always been like this, and asks him what happened in his past that changed him. Because as we know, all of us have a past, and it does mold us into the people that we become today. This is the first time in the entire franchise, spanning the Karate Kid and Cobra Kai, we've seen this man go from sadistic and cruel karate sensei Kreese back into John. Transformed back into the man who was swallowed by his demons. He finally lets his walls down. He takes and begins to speak. As he does, we see the psychiatrist change identities to the people John is talking about. And it's almost as if he's talking to them through the psychiatrist. John was changed forever when he lost the love of his life, Betsy, when he was overseas serving his country in the Vietnam War. He says her death helped him do what he had to do in the war. She says upon reading his file, she knows after the war he opened Cobra Kai and taught kids how to fight. Which he corrects, exclaiming he taught his students how to be strong, how to take all the anger they feel and turn it into power. The psychiatrist asks John if he feels angry after dissecting his quote about turning the anger they feel into power. He's angry at the people who put him in prison, with the psychiatrist countering that he put himself in prison due to his actions. And John angrily states that he did nothing wrong. She asks him if he has no regrets. He asks, what is he supposed to feel regret for? And he looks up at the psychiatrist taking the image of a young Johnny Lawrence and says he wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He was trying to make his students tough, and how deep down what he really wanted was for his students to be better than he could ever be. This emotionally charged scene ends with John looking at the younger version of himself through the lens of the psychiatrists, saying she knows he can be a better man than the one he's become, that there's a good man locked inside somewhere, and he can find him if he simply searches for him. Recognizing he'll be stuck in this cage longer than he originally anticipated, we see a drastic change in Kreese. When originally calm and collected, complying with the younger prisoner's demands for Jell-O. Yes, back to the Jell-O. When the same inmate attempts to bully him again standing outside Kreese's cell, we see the snake return and strike first, attacking the group of inmates, brutally making an example of them as if he was a young man again, with flashes of young Kreese fighting the inmates. With the other prisoners cheering and showing their respect for Kreese, he picks up the fallen inmate and tells him that he will be taking his Jell-O, asking him if he has a problem. The inmate surprisingly says no. Kreese corrects him and makes him call him sensei with respect. Kreese has taken the prison through this show of dominance. Say what you will, and believe me, you will say it. Striking first, striking hard, and showing no mercy was the right thing to do. In the final therapy session, he says he knows that his time is up, and he's going to spend the rest of his days in prison wasting away. The psychiatrist tells him that's a choice, and he can find purpose, even in a place like prison. He says he's made mistakes in his life and learned some hard lessons. However, passing that knowledge on to his students so they wouldn't make the same mistakes gave him purpose. He says everything he fought for is now lost. Every mark and memory of him will be erased. When asking who, Kreese says it's Johnny. How he was like a son to him. Tears in his eyes, he weeps, saying that he's lost him for good. The psychiatrist, comforting him, tells him to fight with his heart and his soul, not his fists. It appears he's heeding her advice. There was an altercation where he stops the inmate he beat up over the Jell-O issue in a meal line. The inmate has grown tired of Kreese, stabbing him several times in the chest, causing him to fall as the man smiles, running away from the scene. We see a doctor wheel Kreese's body into the infirmary, where he doesn't quite feel a pulse but is suspicious about the wound, smelling it, and to the disgust of everybody in the room, tasting it, revealing the substance to be melted Jell-O. Kreese reveals that he's faked his death, knocking out the two guards and stealing the doctor's uniform. Now Kreese, in his disguise, isn't noticed by the two guards rushing past him, and he makes his way to the exit door and opens it. How? Using the psychiatrist's access key he swiped while she was comforting him. Kreese opens the door and calmly escapes the prison, walking away with a smile on his face. Absolutely terrifying. All of it. Every single piece of it. The fake stabbing, the long con game he flawlessly executed on the psychiatrist and Tori, the tears for Johnny, it was all a cover. It was fake. The subterfuge is cosmically powerful. Kreese's manipulations are staggering to witness, seeing the snake re-enter brumation, watching, waiting for his time to rise again, and with season 6 of Cobra Kai already coming out in the 1 of 3 parts this year, with the last part coming out in 2025, I can only wonder where John Kreese is and what he's gonna do next.